I'm Scott Dougan. I'm the production designer for HBO's The Deuce. And what that means, basically, in basic terms, is that I am responsible for the look and the world of the show. And that can be anything from, in broad terms, designing the flight deck of the Millennium Falcon or the streets of Selma, Alabama. And in the case of The Deuce, it is, in our third season, designing the world of 1985's New York. So part of my job is, in defining that world, is to look for images, look for ideas that help the audience understand the place and the time and the characters. And in the first couple of seasons, we started out in 1971. Second season, we moved to 1978. And by the third season, we're in 1985 New York. The story follows the lives of sex workers and the porn industry, bartenders, a sort of demi-monde of Times Square, New York City, gay bar owners. And in 1985, we enter into the decline of the porn industry as video becomes important, and the emergence of AIDS and the AIDS crisis, really the full-blown AIDS crisis in New York City. And finally, sort of the transformation of New York City, in Times Square, what's going to eventually become what it is today, which is sort of the washed-out, Disney-ified, for lack of a better word, Times Square. So these are sort of what I do when I start a project, is I go and I sort of find images, both reference pieces from the area, but also things just like this that give me a sense of the color, the feeling, the texture of a specific place. I look for different photographers. I look for different characters. Color is a huge part, whether they be bright sort of primary colors like the reds and washed out colors like the blues. Look for things that are sort of important. This is Ken Meeks, who was an AIDS activist who died. It's a famous photo of a place called Tin Pan Alley, which was actually one of the ideas for the bar we have in the show. And finally, I ended on this photo because this is a photo by Jane Dixon, who became a friend of mine as I started working on the third season. And this photo sort of captures what I was trying to create on the streets of New York in the time period. This is taken from in 1985. She actually lived with her husband, Charlie Ahern, who's a filmmaker, did the film Wild Style. They lived on 8th Avenue and 43rd Street, which is really like the heart of our story. So my job is to take these pictures and start building a set. So in this case, this is another Jane Dixon photo. This is Show World Center, which is on 8th Avenue and 43rd, 42nd, right next to the Port Authority bus terminal in 1985. And what we do is we sort of create a set. This is our set for The Deuce. In this case, you see there's like a large marquee. We build these signage. Oftentimes, we'll add visual effects to it. But in this case, sort of, the cars and sort of the period idea come. This is another photo. You can see we go in sort of, those neons are created by us. And we sort of create the entire scene, the story. We also do interiors. And so one really important thing on the show was defining the world outside on the streets of New York, which are lights and darks and primary colors. With the interior, this is Maggie Gyllenhaal's character, Candy, who is, in the first season, she's a prostitute. And by the third season, she's become sort of this artist, sort of the core of our show. She becomes a real filmmaker. And this is her apartment. Her and I talked a lot about this, actually, in terms of like color and palette. But you can sort of see that it has a totally different tone than the outside world, while still saying something about the character and the place. It's another thing. Sometimes it's just color. You see that was a reference image going to an image of the show. I'm going to take you through one set that we did and sort of how this works. It's actually the opening scene of the show, season 3. This is another Jane Dixon image. Basically, this was about creating this walk for Vincent and Abby, two of the characters, James Franco's character and Margarita LaVeva's character, Abby. And I got a scene that said they're going to walk from 8th Avenue, and they're going to turn, they're going to see the Marriott Marquis. And so what I do as a production designer is say, OK, that's a place that we're not going to film. It's not 1985 anymore. So first I have to figure out what that looks like in the real world. And then I have to sort of figure out how to put it into our location, our set. And we filmed a lot of different scenes. We redressed this specific couple blocks. I don't know if any of you are from New York. This is Harlem. This is 164th, 63rd Street, and Amsterdam Avenue, which is in sort of Harlem, Washington Heights. We redressed this piece of Amsterdam Avenue for 42nd Street, 8th Avenue, other little snippets. In this case, it was 8th Avenue. And this is actually, I put this in here because this is a picture I took of a ground plan that I sent to the director, and I was like, what about this? So as you see Vincent Abbey walking this way, they turn left, they're on 45th Street, and they see the Marriott Marquis. And next one's sort of a photo. So, okay, how do we sort of start to put this together? This is that view. They turn, they see. And from that view, and this is a Google Earth photo, but from that view, we go and we build a model. So this is a digital model that we made to sort of start constructing what that world's going to be. And then we go from there and we actually build it. So going back to some of those earlier images, you see the construction of that street. You know, we go porn store, chicken place, which comes right from that Jane Dixon photo, a Chinese place, Umi Discounts, which was a real store that was on 8th Avenue, north of 42nd Street. And we build this, we set it all up. This is actually before we're shooting. I think the director, Alex Hall, is sort of standing by that cop car there. And then we start filming. And so this is James and Margarita on the street as we're filming. In this particular scene, David Simon sort of had written in them ducking into a porn video store. So they're kind of going through each of the pieces. And this is where design becomes sort of very integral with storytelling. So in this particular scene, they kind of go through each of these stages of the story we're about to tell. In this case, they duck in, they see this porn video store. The whole world has changed. You know, no longer is it a porn emporium where there's live people. No longer is it a theater where you actually get to see a real movie. It's just video cassettes on a wall. And eventually they walk down the street and they turn and they see the Marriott Marquis. And the Marriott Marquis in this moment becomes a symbol of what Times Square is going to become. This is the illustration we did prior to filming from that model of what we wanted it to sort of look like. And so this incorporates both visual effects and what we were going to do practically. We built that papaya stand on the street. We just built a little, actually got, people tried to go and get Orange Julius's there, but it was all fake. Built it in a parking lot. And that's kind of an illustration of what it is we try to do with each scene and tell the story. So tell the story of how New York is changing, tell the story of the characters and how Vincent and Abby are relating to it. That is basically my job. And beyond that, you know, this is a picture of the same stretch dressed as 42nd Street. So a big part of my job is figuring out how in time and budget you actually recreate a world each time we go up there. This marquee becomes the Selwyn marquee. Rich camera, we've had this up for many seasons and it changes every time we go back there. So there's the practical aspect of it, but more importantly, there's sort of the emotional aspect of the visual landscape. And part of what I concentrated on, focused on this show, was defining this interior and the exterior spaces, showing how by 1985 in New York, a lot of the life had left the city. A lot of what's going on with, this is the inside of Showland Porn Emporium, a lot of this world is sort of falling apart and degraded and dirty and nasty, and other things are starting to spring up, artwork, graffiti, people are going out to Los Angeles and defining the space that way, and that can be with color, it can be with texture. In this case, you know, it's lighting, which the director of photography and I sort of hash over. And finally, it's sort of about creating a palette. And in this case, in the ending moments of the show, it's really about creating a palette of loss, like an idea of what all of that being washed away led to. This is Paul, who's the owner of a number of gay establishments, having just lost his partner in his apartment. And finally, Maggie, Candy's character, sort of making her last effort at filmmaking, and that sort of palette, again, reemerging as her story comes to a close. And that is the design of The Deuce. So thank you guys very much.